A car dealership manager dismissed a man in a hoodie, refusing to sell him a luxury SUV, only to realize too late that he wasn't just a customer. He was the new CEO. The sun hung high over Westwood Heights, a district of sleek glass towers and winding streets lined with mansions hidden behind wrought iron gates. It was a place where wealth wasn't just present, it was expected. Luxury cars rolled smoothly down the road, their engines purring as they passed boutiques, Michelin-starred restaurants, and high-end dealerships. At the heart of it all sat Stirling Elite Motors, a dealership that prided itself on exclusivity, where only the city's most affluent clientele were welcomed with open arms. Inside, the showroom gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, reflecting the polished exteriors of Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, and Lamborghinis. The air carried the faintest scent of leather and new car polish, an aroma that whispered of wealth and status. Behind a sleek mahogany desk, Victoria Hayes surveyed the showroom like a queen overseeing her domain. At 47 years old, she wasn't just a manager, she was a gatekeeper. For nearly 2 decades, she had built a reputation for knowing exactly who belonged in a place like this and who didn't. Her gaze flitted across the room, landing briefly on a middle-aged couple admiring a Bentley. Potential buyers. She made a mental note to approach them shortly. Across the showroom, a young man in an expensive suit browsed the latest Porsche model. Serious buyer. But then the glass doors chimed, and in walked a man who didn't fit the mold. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and looked to be in his early 40s. He wore a simple navy hoodie, dark jeans, and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. His posture was relaxed, his hands tucked in his pockets, and his expression unreadable. He didn't walk in with the air of someone trying to impress. He didn't seem like he was here to prove anything. He simply took in the showroom with a quiet sort of confidence. Victoria barely hid her sigh. She had seen this before. Men who wandered in, dreaming of the day they could afford one of these cars, hoping for a test drive to impress a friend or a date. Men who asked for prices they knew they couldn't afford. She had learned to spot them instantly, the hesitation in their step, the way their eyes lingered just a little too long on the price tags. She had no patience for them. Her sales associate, Ryan Brooks, a young, eager employee who had only been with them a year, was about to step forward when Victoria stopped him with a subtle shake of her head. "Don't waste your time," she murmured, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her wrist. "He's just looking." Ryan Brooks hesitated but didn't argue. Victoria's instincts were rarely wrong. If she said someone wasn't worth the effort, they weren't. That was the unspoken rule at Stirling Elite Motors. But the man wasn't just looking. He walked with deliberate steps toward one of the most expensive vehicles in the showroom, a 2024 Range Rover Autobiography. Its black paint gleamed under the showroom lights, and its pristine chrome accents glistened like jewelry. It was a car that exuded power, luxury, and status. The kind of car driven by executives, celebrities, and tech moguls, not by men in hoodies and worn-out sneakers. He stopped beside it, running his fingers lightly along the sleek finish, then glanced around the room as if taking in more than just the cars, as if taking in the people. His eyes finally locked onto Victoria's, and then, without hesitation, he started walking toward her. By the time he reached the desk, Victoria had already crafted her response in her mind. She would entertain him just enough to remain professional, but she would shut him down before he could waste anyone's time. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice calm and even. "I'm interested in that Range Rover over there. I'd like to know more about it." Victoria offered a polite but uninterested smile. She had no doubt where this conversation was going. "That's a fully loaded autobiography model," she said smoothly. "Top-tier luxury, $165,000. The man nodded as if the price didn't faze him. "Sounds like what I'm looking for." Victoria folded her arms. She had heard this before. The confidence, the casual ease, it was all part of the act. She tilted her head slightly, her smile never faltering. "Are you aware of our financing options?" she asked. "A purchase like that requires either substantial credit or an upfront payment." The man's gaze remained steady. "I won't need financing." Victoria forced a polite chuckle. How many times had she heard that? They always said that. They always wanted to seem like they had the means. But when it came time to pull out a card or sign a contract, They disappeared. I see, she said, her tone still professional but slightly amused. Well, if you're serious about purchasing, we'll need to run a soft credit check before moving forward. It's company policy. Ryan Brooks shifted uneasily beside her. They both knew that wasn't true. No such policy existed, but it was a convenient way to separate real buyers from dreamers. The man showed no reaction, no annoyance, no protest. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black card holder. I'd like to test drive it, he said. Victoria's expression stiffened. We don't offer test drives on vehicles at that price point, without verified proof of income, she said smoothly. I'm sure you understand. The man's lips curved slightly, almost as if he had expected this. Oh, I understand, he said. But Victoria had no idea what was coming next. The man's expression didn't change. He simply studied Victoria, his gaze steady but unreadable, as if he was taking mental notes. If he was offended, he didn't show it. If he was frustrated, he didn't let it slip. He simply watched. That alone unsettled Ryan Brooks, who had seen plenty of customers get defensive when challenged. But this man wasn't getting defensive. He was waiting. Let me get this straight, the man said finally, his voice still calm, measured. You don't offer test drives unless I prove I can afford the car? Correct, Victoria replied, her smile still polite, but her tone firmer now. She was already mentally dismissing him. This was the part where most people walked away, either embarrassed or annoyed. We cater to a specific clientele, she continued, and we've had issues in the past with people joyriding high-end models and not following through. Ryan Brooks shifted awkwardly at the way she phrased it. A specific clientele. It wasn't the first time she had said something like that, but today something about it felt off. Victoria, however, didn't seem to notice. She was already moving on, turning her attention toward a wealthy older gentleman in a tailored suit who was admiring a Bentley on the other side of the showroom. But the man in the hoodie wasn't done. What about cash buyers? He asked. Victoria glanced back at him, now mildly irritated. Excuse me. If someone wanted to pay in full, no financing, no credit check, would that change your test drive policy? Victoria almost laughed. People didn't just walk into Stirling Elite Motors and drop 6 figures in cash. That's not how things worked. People financed, leased, or sent their accountants to handle payments. This guy was bluffing. I appreciate your enthusiasm, she said, her voice now dripping with condescension. But I'm sure you understand we have policies in place for a reason. For the first time, the man's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, more like an amused realization, as if he had been expecting this exact response. I see, he murmured. Then, slowly, deliberately, he pulled something out of his pocket. A wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a sleek black card. Ryan Brooks's stomach tightened. He knew what that was. An American Express Centurion card. The black card. The kind of card you couldn't apply for. You had to be invited. The kind of card that came with no credit limit and was reserved for high-net-worth individuals. Ryan Brooks wasn't the only one who saw it. The moment the black card flashed, a few of the other salespeople paused what they were doing. Even the receptionist at the front desk, who had been mindlessly scrolling through emails, straightened in her seat. The energy in the room shifted, subtly but unmistakably. But Victoria, she didn't move. She saw the card. She knew exactly what it meant. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. No test drive, huh? The man asked, slipping the card back into his pocket, his voice now carrying an unmistakable edge. Victoria tilted her chin up slightly, as if reclaiming control of the situation. I'm afraid not. Ryan Brooks expected the man to argue, to call her out, to demand to see a higher up. Instead, he just stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, as if considering something. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Victoria exhaled slightly, then turned back toward the older gentleman eyeing the Bentley, ready to move on. But Ryan Brooks, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The man in the hoodie wasn't walking like someone who had just been rejected. He wasn't leaving with the stiff posture of someone humiliated or the quick steps of someone angry. He was walking slowly, deliberately, and he wasn't leaving the showroom. Instead, he stopped beside a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, running his fingers over the chrome handle, tilting his head slightly, admiring it. Ryan Brooks's heart pounded in his chest. He had a sinking feeling, a deep unshakable hunch, that Victoria had just made a huge mistake. Ryan Brooks couldn't look away. His gut told him something was about to happen, something big. He had worked at Stirling Elite Motors long enough to know the usual reactions when someone got turned away. There was frustration, sometimes embarrassment, even the occasional argument. But this man, he wasn't reacting at all. Instead, he continued inspecting the G-Wagon, running his fingers over the smooth black finish, his movements slow, measured. He looked more like someone taking notes than someone admiring a car. That's what unsettled Ryan Brooks the most. It was as if the man had come here for a different reason entirely. Just as Ryan Brooks was about to say something, the glass doors swung open again. This time the sound carried through the showroom, sharper than before, and with it came a presence that changed the entire atmosphere. A sharply dressed man in his mid-50s stepped inside, his tailored navy suit perfectly pressed, his graying hair neatly styled. His leather shoes made barely a sound against the tiled floor, yet somehow everyone seemed to notice his arrival. Marcus Whitmore. Ryan Brooks's stomach dropped. The regional director rarely visited the showroom unless something important was happening. Victoria must have noticed too, because she straightened immediately, her posture shifting from casual authority to professional polish. Her entire demeanor snapped into place. "Mr. Whitmore," Victoria greeted, her voice light, effortless, the way she always sounded when trying to impress higher-ups. "What a pleasant surprise. What brings you in today?" Marcus barely acknowledged her. His eyes weren't on her. They were on the man in the hoodie. And then, in a move that sent a shockwave through the entire showroom, Marcus's face broke into a broad grin. "Nathan, I was just about to call you." Ryan Brooks felt like all the air had been sucked from the room. Nathan. He knows him. The man, Nathan, finally turned from the G-Wagon, his face relaxed, unreadable. "Good to see you, Marcus," he said smoothly, shaking the director's hand with an ease that spoke of familiarity. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "I told you this was one of our finest locations. You'll love it here." Ryan Brooks wasn't the only one frozen in place. Several salespeople exchanged glances, whispering to each other under their breaths. The receptionist at the front desk sat motionless, her mouth slightly open as if she had just realized something crucial. But Victoria wasn't moving at all. Her face was carefully controlled, but Ryan Brooks could see it. The slight tension in her jaw, the way her fingers twitched slightly against the desk, the way her eyes darted between Nathan and Marcus, searching for something, anything, that made sense. And then Marcus turned to the staff. "Everyone," he announced, still grinning. "I'd like you all to meet Nathan Caldwell, the new CEO of Stirling Elite Motors." The moment those words left his mouth, everything stopped. Silence stretched across the showroom. Thick, heavy, unrelenting. Ryan Brooks's breath caught in his throat. The CEO. Victoria's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. The realization was hitting her. The man she had dismissed. The man she had refused to test drive. The man she had lied to about company policy. He owned the company. Ryan Brooks's heart pounded. He could almost feel the weight of the moment pressing down on Victoria, crushing the air around her. This wasn't just a mistake. This was something she couldn't undo. And Nathan, he didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He simply watched her, his expression unreadable, his posture relaxed. But his silence, it said everything. The silence was suffocating. The weight of Marcus's words settled over the showroom like a heavy fog, thick and unshakable. Nathan Caldwell, the CEO, the man Victoria had dismissed, refused, and humiliated just minutes ago, wasn't just some random customer. He was her new boss. Ryan Brooks didn't move. No one did. The employees stood frozen, their expressions a mix of shock, amusement, and silent horror. No one dared to speak. Even the customers in the showroom sensed something had shifted. The older gentleman in the suit, the one Victoria had been preparing to assist, had subtly stepped back, watching from a safe distance. Victoria, however, was trapped in the moment. She blinked rapidly, her brain scrambling to process what had just happened. This had to be a mistake, a joke, some kind of elaborate misunderstanding. But it wasn't. Nathan finally spoke, his voice calm, Measured, the same voice she had dismissed just minutes ago. "Miss Hayes," he said, tilting his head slightly, "you just refused to sell a car to your new CEO." The words hung in the air, unshakable. Victoria's lips parted slightly, but no words came. For the first time in her career, she was speechless. Ryan Brooks could see it, the panic creeping in. She was usually so composed, so sure of herself. But now she looked like a woman who had just realized she had stepped off a cliff. Marcus, sensing the tension, glanced between them. "Wait, what happened?" he asked, his voice breaking through the thick silence. Nathan didn't answer right away. He let the moment stretch, let the weight of it settle onto Victoria's shoulders. His expression remained unreadable, his eyes locked onto hers, as if waiting to see what she would do next. Then casually, almost conversationally, he turned to Ryan Brooks. "Ryan Brooks, is it?" Nathan asked. Ryan Brooks's throat was dry. He managed a stiff nod. "Yes, sir." Nathan studied him for a beat before continuing. "Tell me something, Ryan Brooks. If I had walked in here today wearing a suit, speaking the exact same words I just said, would I have needed to pull out my credit card just to be taken seriously?" Ryan Brooks felt every pair of eyes in the room shift toward him. He hesitated. He knew the answer. Everyone did. But saying it out loud, in front of Victoria, in front of Marcus, in front of the entire showroom, could cost him his job. Nathan must have sensed his hesitation because he gave a slight nod. "You don't have to answer that." Victoria inhaled sharply, finally finding her voice. "Mr. Caldwell," she started, her tone smooth, practiced, the way people talk when they're trying to control the damage. "I truly apologize if there was any misunderstanding." Nathan's brow lifted slightly. "Misunderstanding?" She let out a soft, forced chuckle. "I was simply following store policy," she continued, trying to regain control. "We have strict guidelines when it comes to test drives on luxury models. I would have handled any customer the same way." Nathan studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he turned toward Marcus. "Marcus," he said, voice still calm, still controlled. "When did Stirling Elite Motors start requiring a soft credit check before customers could even sit inside a car?" Marcus's brows furrowed. "We don't." Ryan Brooks felt Victoria's last thread of defense snap. The showroom was dead silent. Nathan let the truth settle. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't making a scene. But somehow that was worse. Victoria's palms were damp now. For the first time, she realized she had lost control of the situation. She tried again. "Mr. Caldwell, Nathan raised a hand just slightly, just enough to silence her, and when he spoke again his voice was sharp. "Final. I came here undercover for a reason, Victoria." She swallowed hard. "To see how our customers are treated. To see if the values we claim to uphold are actually being practiced." His expression darkened slightly. "And I've seen enough." Victoria's chest tightened. Ryan Brooks exhaled slowly, feeling the tension shift for the first time. The employees exchanged uneasy glances, waiting for what came next. And Victoria, for the first time in her life, had nothing left to say. The weight of the moment pressed down on her like a vice. Everything she had built, everything she had prided herself on, was unraveling right in front of her. She had spent years honing her instincts, developing an unshakable confidence in her ability to judge people at a glance. But today her instincts hadn't just failed her. They had ruined her. Nathan let the silence linger. He didn't need to raise his voice. The damage was already done. He had seen the way she had dismissed him, the way she had made assumptions without hesitation, the way she had lied to maintain her authority. And now there was no going back. Victoria's mind scrambled for an escape, for some way to control the narrative. She had always been good at that, always been able to shift a situation in her favor. But this was something she couldn't spin, couldn't reframe. This was the cold, undeniable truth, spoken out loud in front of everyone. She swallowed, forcing herself to hold Nathan's gaze. "Mr. Caldwell, I understand your concern," she said, her voice steady, though there was an unmistakable tightness to it. "But surely we can discuss this privately. I've been a valuable part of this company for years." Nathan's expression didn't change. "You have." For a fleeting second a flicker of hope crossed Victoria's face. Maybe there was a chance to salvage this. Maybe she could convince him that she had simply made a mistake, that she could learn from it. Maybe there was still a way out. Then Nathan nodded once. And your track record speaks for itself. The relief barely had a chance to settle before he continued. That's why you're done here. The words hit like a hammer. Victoria's face drained of color. The silence in the showroom was deafening. Ryan Brooks's stomach twisted. He had known this was coming, but hearing it said out loud, watching Victoria's world collapse in real time, was something else entirely. Nathan didn't wait for a response, didn't need one. His decision had been made. I don't run a company that turns people away based on appearances, he said, his tone cool, unwavering. If that's a problem for you, Victoria, then this was never the place for you to begin with. Victoria, then this was never the place for you to begin with. The employees exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of shock, unease, and understanding. Some of them had seen Victoria operate like this before. Some had even followed her lead. But now they were seeing the consequences. Marcus exhaled, rubbing his temple. He wasn't going to fight Nathan on this. He knew better. And Victoria? She stood there frozen as her career fell apart. She had always believed that power came from control, that being able to decide who belonged and who didn't was what made her good at her job. But today she wasn't the one in control. And for the first time, she understood what that felt like. Nathan gave her one last look, his expression unreadable. Then with a small nod, he turned to Marcus. We need to have a conversation about hiring and training. Marcus straightened. Understood. Nathan glanced around the showroom, his gaze sweeping over the employees, who had stood silently throughout the exchange. Some things are going to change. And with that he walked away. The tension in the air finally cracked, though the weight of what had just happened remained. Victoria stood rooted in place, her hands clenched tightly at her sides, her breaths uneven. Ryan Brooks exchanged a glance with one of the junior salespeople, Leo Carter. They didn't need to say anything. They both knew this wasn't just about Victoria. This was about how things were run. Nathan hadn't just exposed one bad manager. He had exposed a culture. He had exposed a culture. And that was about to change.